Hi everybody, I'm Mike McCrory and this is Would You Make It? In my last video I made a set of checkers, and in this video I'm going to make a box to hold them. So let's get started. I'm going to start with the interior compartment of the box and work my way out. So I'm cutting some thin strips of maple and I'll mill these down to 1/8 of an inch in thickness. Some viewers have commented that they enjoy a video like this with no music playing in the background, while others prefer to have music. If you're watching this video and you'd rather have music to listen to, then click on the link above. The entire rest of the video is exactly the same, except that the other video has music in the background, whereas this one does not. The inner compartment is not going to be very high, so I'm splitting this piece down the middle so that I'll have enough to make the entire inner compartment. I'm cutting a slot that's 1/8 of an inch thick, the curved thickness of the blade, and I'm going to insert a piece of wood that's 1/8 of an inch thick to fit the slot, and I'm going to use that as a stop block to cut the pieces. And I'll first use this as a stop block to cut the exact length of the interior dividers. And then I'll set the blade at 45 degrees to cut the mitered corners of the outside edge strips. The pieces of wood are 3/4 of an inch wide, so I'm going to cut slots into the intersecting points to be just a little bit higher than halfway, so I've set this at 13/32 of an inch. And now I'm using that same pin, but instead of using it as a stop block, I'm using it to index all of the cuts for the intersection points so that they are equally spaced. I'll cut 3 slots in the pieces that go in one direction and 6 slots in the opposite direction. That will give me 2 rows of 7 compartments for each color, for a total of 28 compartments. And now I'm using blue tape to hold everything in place while I glue it up together. While that's gluing up, I'm going to work on the exterior of the box, and I'm going to start by cutting bloodwood. Bloodwood is what I use for the dark checker pieces. I also have a piece of boxwood left over from a chess set that I had created. If you haven't seen that video, you can click on the link above to see how I turned individual chess pieces from boxwood and ebony. For the other two sides of the box, I'm using walnut. Walnut is one of the woods that I used for the squares in the checkerboard that I made for this client. Using the stop block on my miter gauge, I'm cutting each of the side pieces for the box to be exactly the right size to fit around the interior compartment that's already made. The other type of wood that I used in the checkerboard squares was ash, so I'm cutting a thin strip of ash. It's about 7 inches wide, and after milling it will be 1/8 of an inch thick. I'm going to join the sides of the box with box joints. That will help to carry on the checkerboard theme. And I've set the thickness of the dado set to be the same as the thickness of the box sides. And now I'm setting the height of the dado blade to be exactly the right height so that there's no excess material protruding after the box joints are joined together. Because this is a new setup, I want to make sure that everything fits perfectly. So I'm going to cut the joints with some test pieces and make adjustments if necessary. The test pieces fit quite well. The joint was just a little bit too tight, so I loosened the red knob at the end of the eye box jig, and that loosened the joint. And now I'm making the final cuts on the real pieces. And I want to make sure that everything remains vertical at all times, make sure there's no slippage. So I'm clamping the piece for every cut. It's a little bit extra work, but it's well worth it to make sure that you get nice square joints. If you want to learn more information about the iBox jig and how to set it up, you can click on the link above. Now I'm cutting the size of the box top. This is the ash piece, and the bottom is going to be made from plywood, walnut plywood. I'm just sanding the edges of the compartment to prepare it for flocking. On the bottom, I've got the bottom turned upside down because that's the face that's going to be facing upward, because I want the nice walnut side to be facing downward. The reason for that is because the bottom on the inside is going to be flocked, so you will not see this lower quality surface. I've taped all the parts that I do not want to have flocked. And then I'm applying flocking adhesive. And then I'll pump on the flocking powder. I'll set that overnight. It needs to cure for at least 12 hours. Now I'm using my router to cut dados for the top and the bottom. I had a little bit of blowout with my first piece on the boxwood, so for all the subsequent cuts, I plunged it down at the back end just to make that one cut, lifted it up, and then proceeded to cut from the front all the way to the back, and that eliminated the possibility of having tear out at the back. I had already cut down the height of the bloodwood material, and then from my test piece that I used for the box joint setup, I'm cutting a little strip that will glue onto the end of the top piece. I'll sand the interior of the sides of the box prior to gluing it up, because it'll be a lot harder to sand it after it's glued together. The client wanted to have something with my logo on it, so I decided to use this Ortur laser to engrave my logo in the top of the box. This was a fairly large logo, and it took roughly 45 minutes to an hour to engrave this. While the engraver was running, I was able to glue up the box. I had already sprayed the interior faces of the sides of the box with lacquer. I just did not record that. And the reason I did that is because of the flocking that's in the bottom of the box. I wouldn't be able to spray on a finish with the flocking in place without going to the added trouble of trying to cover it. So it was a lot easier to spray it first. I had dimensioned everything very tightly, and luckily this interior compartment was able to fit. There was a little bit of burning from the laser around the outside edges of some of the letters, but that was easy to sand off with 220 grit sandpaper. And now I'm going to glue on the piece of bloodwood that fits nicely into the box joint, and it glues on to the end of the top. Now I'm going to use some boxwood sawdust and glue and fill in that part of the boxwood joint that had the blowout. And at the same time, I will apply it everywhere just to make sure that I have nice tight joints. They were pretty tight already, but it doesn't hurt to go that extra step. After drying, it's ready for final sanding. After everything was sanded, I sprayed the exterior of the box with a couple of coats of lacquer. I started with the lid, and then I inserted it into the box so that I could spray the sides. And the reason I did that is because I didn't want to get any of the lacquer on the flocking in the bottom. So the cover was used to protect that. As soon as I sprayed it, I pulled it out immediately so that it wouldn't stick, and then I sprayed the top one more time. And so that's it. It turned out pretty well, I think. So I gotta ask, would you make it?